What was the worst wedding ceremony you have ever attended? Probably the one where the groom's mother got fucked up drunk and tried her luck with every guy there, including me, who were almost 40 years younger than her. What made it incredibly awkward was her ex-husband was there just giving all us lads death stares when she made a move on us. I'll never forget her sliding up to the bar next to me, telling me quite loudly how she needs a good fuck, and promised the best BJ I'd ever have, while her dejected-looking ex sat across the bar listening to her go into detail about how he could never satisfy her because he didn't eat pussy. I myself was cornered at least 4 times by her throughout the night. Oh god, I can just picture it now. Friend's little sister gets married. Their dad is one of the toughest guys I know, and this is his youngest daughter getting married. They pose up for the inevitable garter removal, complete with photographer. Groom looks the father-in-law dead in the eye as he is removing the garter and says, "This is for you, Big Ed." It's all night tonight. The reception basically detonated at that point. Shit was on. My buddy and I tried to stop Ed from beating the groom to within an inch of his life. We were hanging on, getting dragged over while the bride is crying and the groom is too stupid to grab her and make a hasty exit. There was a lot of shouting. I got my suit torn, and the reception ended immediately. Some hippie friends of my parents got married when I was about 14, and it was a location wedding at some earthy little mountain getaway in Tennessee. Only it was outside and in mid-August, and in Tennessee that's like 90-degree, full humidity weather. But that's okay, since it was so hot they decided to do it barefoot in a creek. Well, they had a cage of butterflies to release during the kiss, but as it turns out, they had all died because of the heat. When the big moment came, someone opened the cage dramatically to let them free, and like 2 half-dead butterflies stumbled out and the rest were shriveled and dead inside. The hippie bride screamed in horror. The worst one was where the best man gave the speech. This best man was a little too drunk, but you know when some people get drunk they spill the beans? Well, he did. You could tell what was going to happen too. I sat there thinking he was going to say how he slept with a hooker on his bucks night or was actually gay, or something shocking along those lines, but what he said was way worse. The best man staggers up saying how beautiful the bride looks and was nice enough with those remarks. He then said she'd have trouble with the groom in bed because he has a micro penis. He then starts yelling, "Micro penis," while being dragged off by his mates. The groom slumped his head into his hands out of utter embarrassment and had actual tears. Obviously something he's had to deal with his entire life. His wife got up, was sobbing and ran out. We sat at our table thinking that after not even 24 hours, this marriage was over. Turns out this couple had both been saving themselves for this marriage too. I felt horrible for the both of them. Almost 10 years later they are still married, have 2 awesome kids and are very happy together. Turns out she didn't care at the end of the day and that he makes her very happy, in the sack. Or so they say jokingly whenever we catch up with them. Still, most awkward thing I've ever seen at a wedding. Posted from my throwaway. This is the second time I get to post this. I work as an event planner. It was the wedding of 2 fairly wealthy families, and the bride had decided on a rather rural, shabby chic aesthetic. The reception, she decided, would take place on family property, in a historic barn. This caused a huge flurry of issues. Between having to have the barn cleaned, the fact that we needed auxiliary tents as the barn wasn't large enough, and the fact that the property lacked electricity and running water. The latter was solved with a bank of generators, tubs of water for catering, and a side tent with porta-johns hidden inside. The bride had, to be honest, been quite a bridezilla, but it's my job to deal with those things. At this point, the ceremony had ended, cocktail hour is shutting down, professional photos were taken. We were prepping to transition to the entrance of the bridal party, which would be followed immediately by first dance and cake cutting. During this, the dinner would be staged, so every aspect was being fairly carefully timed out. I was speaking to the caterer when I happened to glance over and see the most curious blend of expressions pass over the bride's face, and she frantically waved down my assistant. A few moments later, my headset beeped on, and my assistant said we have an issue. It turns out that the bride had gambled on a fart and lost in a big way. Now, the bride was wearing a huge, full ball gown, with a fitted, bones strapless top in a sort of embellished mesh. Underneath, she had a shaper garment and hoops and slips. We had already realized there was zero way of her going to the bathroom. We had issues getting her into a limo, and having her use a porta-johns meant one of us would have to get personal. That was my assistant's job. I radioed to everyone to expect a 15-minute delay, and they headed towards the tent. The 15 minutes pass, then 20. Finally, my earpiece beeps on. The previous issue is more than we anticipated. waited. I ran over to find my assistant looking horrified. The bride, it turns out, had been using some health shakes in an attempt to fix last-minute bloating. This had mixed poorly with the cocktails from earlier, and she had eaten a fairly decent breakfast. The substance that had come out of her body as a result defied explanation. It was slimy, oily even, with stringy bits and the consistency of hair gel. Not only had it been a rather profound accident, but the smell was unrivaled. Generally, a substance no human body should emit, but the thing that set it over the edge was that the shape of the bride wore was a latex deal that came down over the thighs and up to her bra. Waterproof. The poo had just sort of filled it. Like a water balloon of horror, my assistant had opened up the snap crotch and just released the evil trickling down the bride's thighs. My assistant quickly sealed it back up and she and the bride vainly tried to wipe up the goo, dry, with toilet paper. This just spread it around, so they decide to give up. Now I have a shell-shocked assistant and a crying bride. You can smell her 4 feet away. The bride is just flipping out that she's making her guests wait, that she has a choreographed dance waiting to happen, and she needs to be introduced now. I'm just looking at her manicured nails. Residue of diarrhea are just embedded in her nail bed. I start trying to scrape the poo out with a fabric stain wipe, while the bride insists that the show must go on. Immediately, I give in that this is an issue which will have to wait, and signal to start introductions. The groom looks vaguely disconcerted by his new wife soda, but I tell my assistant to distract him until they take the floor. Introductions happen, the dance starts, and we find some fresh horror. The dance was a choreographed affair, and as the groom spun his bride around, hand on her waist, he is squishing the poo up the insides of the waist trainer, up and out the back waistband. To our horror, we watch as oily stains spread across the mid-back of the gown. As we are still cringing from this, the groom sets his hand firmly in the middle of the poo stain. Action had to be taken as soon as the couple left the dance floor. It was obvious, and I left my assistant in charge while I made preparations. She kept radioing me. The stain was spreading. She could smell the poo from her spot by the DJ. They were cutting the cake now. They were feeding the cake to each other, both now with shit-stained fingers. Each was looking downright repulsed. As they left the dance floor, I had someone rush wet naps to the groom and to bring me the bride. The support tent was closed down for me, and I pulled a tub of clean water from the caterers. She walked in to find me in dish gloves and a poncho. Like American Psycho, the 5 minutes, I was sponging down a sobbing, naked bride, while I questioned every life decision that led to this point. The diarrhea was everywhere, spread in a thin layer across her butt cheeks. It may be the most disgusting thing I've ever dealt with. With her clean, I threw away the waist shaper, and scrubbed down the $15K wedding gown back in a plastic basin. The inner lining was a loss, and I cut it out completely, dressed again, and offered Xanax. The bride was little worse for wear, except for missing her dinner. The support tent smelled like cheese doodle and just was closed for the remainder of the event. The groom was a sport, never directly saying anything, but asking if we could cancel the garter toss as he didn't really want to go under her skirt. I don't blame him. Pictures from the event appeared in a magazine. Still photos, away from the smell, were beautiful. Let me take you back to January 2012. It was a really hot summer here in the southern hemisphere. The couple got a church's reservation for a Saturday afternoon. The groom was a bit pissed because his favorite soccer team was playing that day. This will be the center of the problem, but let me explain the rest. Anyway, I remember we were driving to the church and listening to the soccer match because the team playing was one of the 2 big teams in our country and everybody was laughing at the situation. Just to put it in perspective for the Americans, it would be as if the Chicago Bulls with Michael Jordan were relegated to a 2nd division league. When we arrived it was halftime, so we entered the church and the groom was waiting for the bride to walk down the aisle. This church had some old speakers that the bishop used to talk to the attendants. As soon as the bride enters the chambers, they put the wedding music on the speakers, but there was some heavy interference from the soccer match. It was hilarious as you could barely hear the narrator's voice and the commercials. Oh my god, the commercials. This is the commercial that was broadcasted including the interference. It basically says you have already tasted the small one. Now taste the big one. The big one sweets, double and triple flavor. I remember I was in tears. The bride was red of anger and everybody was trying not to laugh. My god, I love that commercial. I am a resident firefighter, basically a trainee slave. Anyway, one of the guys got married and asked me and another slave to help direct parking in this field and set up food. Wedding starts at 4:30. I arrive at 2:30 to help with setup. Everything is already done. Groom invite me to try the micro Bruce. There are 3 kegs. I have one of each. Cars start arriving, it's hot, so I grab a cup of raspberry lemonade and fill it with half vodka and get a Long Island iced tea. I feel like I should take a minute to mention that I used to be a really heavy drinker, especially after my wife left for a guy she dated in high school and bailed on me and our 2-month-old son. I'm a little bitter. I'm super fucking bitter. I am having a great time staggering around and pointing at cars to get them into the right spots. I vaguely recall something about alcohol taking time to absorb. I stagger into my seat. Wedding is swell. I've done some shots and someone gave me a cigar. I don't smoke and this makes me feel weird. I start confronting people who don't like me from our department. I am everyone's best friend. No one from either family knows me. I coincidentally am dressing in the wedding party's colors. So the families are all confused. Someone tells me I need to eat food to help even out the alcohol. I eat a ton of food. Everything is wrong. I am going to get really sick. I go behind a barn and find a wood cart to pass out on and I text my girlfriend of 3 months that I need a ride home. When she says yes, I tell her that I think I love her. It's 5:30. I am vomiting and dry heaving while people come over to take pictures of me. A man brings his young daughter over and tells her this is why you don't drink. Suddenly I wake up. It's 9:30 and I have 15 missed calls. The great chick I was dating before I fucked everything up has been looking for me for 2.5 hours while drunk guys hit on her. She takes me home. I curl into a ball and she brings me water. I went back from her place at 10:30 in the morning to clean up all my puke. Everyone has video of me giving the bride wedding advice. Pictures of me getting tied up, trying to fight people. And that is how I represented my family, community, and department in front of hundreds of strangers. Good times. OP asked for bad weddings, not weddings you almost ruined. I mean, it was the worst for me. I had a brother who had a wedding reception in August with full suits required, no AC in the reception hall, no food, no alcohol, 2-hour-long mass as part of the ceremony. That's right. I kinda like this guy. That's all I've ever wanted. I'm reusing this post someone s similar thread a few years ago. It was way late. This will probably get buried again. But here we go. About 5 years ago I went to my uncle's sister-in-law's wedding. She's a fat New Yorker who relocated to North Carolina after all her family moved here. She thinks she's God's gift to the earth and that everything should be about her. So imagine her with a wedding. She demanded 2 bridal showers, 2 bachelorette parties, had to have one in NY and one in NC, top shelf liquor, some DJ from the local top 40 station, fancy meal, etc. Her groom was obliterated drunk before the ceremony as there was a pre-wedding reception beforehand. The ordained minister for the wedding was one of her bridesmaids' husbands. When the actual ceremony happened, the groom acted like he was leaving her at the altar during the vow exchanges and handed my aunt letter. He stormed down the aisle acting all flustered saying he can't do it and then yells, "Y'all got punked, we've been married for over a year." The only reason I attended the wedding is that I love her parents to death. They're the sweetest people in the world and the hurt on their faces from this was obvious. They put almost all of their money into this wedding and then for this to happen was awful. They spent well over 25 to 30k on a wedding that if I was them, I wouldn't have let them in the reception. My brother had gotten married earlier that year and the first thing that the bride said to my brother and his wife after the ceremony is, "Guess we actually got married first after all." They stole the thank yous on the back of their program from my brother's wedding, though it had a ton of laughable typos on it, and part of their first dance song too. The groom's pants kept falling down all night and looked like an absolutely disaster. Each time he reappeared he had one less article of clothing, but the best was when stood up from the reception table and his pants fell to his ankles and he almost tripped down the stage. 3 days later these two assholes go on the radio station and brag about it. I put a stop on my check and wrote a new one to her parents as did most others because it was clearly about the money and presents and being a whole new level of center of attention at a wedding. Oh well, karma got her back later that night of her wedding as her grandmother's ring that she was given broke. Her parents refused to give it back to her. Groom's not allowed at any family function since. They have a kid now, but karma again as she is great for everyone but the mother where she becomes a holy terror. Long term short. Bride and groom already married, spent lots of the bride's parents' money, acted like kids, wedding ring broke, people hate them and deservingly so. One of my ex-girlfriend's relatives were getting married and she decided to bring me along so I could meet the entirety of her very terrifying, very Irish Catholic family. I was the brown, butch lesbian elephant in the room the entire wedding, so things were already awkward enough. There was this drunk old dude who kept trying to talk to me the whole time. He thought I was a boy, so he kept on calling me son. For context, I'm Hispanic, so our wedding traditions are apparently very different. Things were fine up until after the bride tossed the bouquet. I guess the groom was supposed to toss the garter next and the men were supposed to catch it. I had assumed that this was just another cute game and that, just like the bouquet, whoever caught was going to get married next or whatever. The old drunk guy comes up behind me, puts his hand on my shoulder, and says, "Son, they're all drunk. The groom is going to toss the garter in the air and they're going to jump up and catch it. But they'll all miss and it's going to fall to the floor. That's when you swoop in and grab it." Everything happened the way the old drunk guy predicted and I caught the garter. The room fell silent. I had no idea you had to put it on the lady who caught the bouquet. I tried to pass the garter off to one of the guys but no one would take it. The poor lady looked mortified and so uncomfortable. I went up to her, mouthed sorry, and gave her an ankle bracelet. All the old people were really pissed and my poor girlfriend at the time had to hear a mouthful from everyone. The couple that was getting married ended up divorcing a year later. Long story short, I'm a butch lesbian and I didn't understand wedding traditions and I caught the garter and embarrassed everyone. Is it wrong that I hope the old drunk guy has a version of this story? Took this boy under my wing at a wedding once and he didn't look too sure of himself. So I gave him a tip to catch the garter. The boy took my advice and got it like a champ, but the poor kid just didn't have the balls to get the garter way on up that girl's leg. Left it right on the ankle, probably thought he was being a gentleman. I was in my sister's wedding a long time ago. I recall it being the worst 24 hours period of that year. She was normally a very fun and enjoyable person to be around, but wedding planning changed her. The wedding wasn't even supposed to be extravagant or anything, just a happy time with a happy couple. Throughout the planning process, red flags starting popping up. She would freak out over the tiniest details that honestly didn't even involve the wedding itself, like what guests were carpooling together on the drive to the venue. No shit, she turned into such an incredible cunt the closer the wedding got. She wanted the bridesmaids to be with her 2 whole days before the rehearsal dinner on the eve of her wedding. That didn't happen. Love ya bitch, but no. I stayed up for 24 hours straight helping her make last-minute arrangements and get absolutely everything ready. That part wasn't much of a sacrifice. It's a wedding, it's family, that's fine. What made everything awful was this superiority complex she was infected with the moment the sun came up on her wedding day. She transformed from a slightly overwhelmed bride-to-be to a spectacularly frenzied monster. I'm not talking a woman whose wedding plans are falling apart or anything relatively understandable. Everything was happening according to plan. It was all coming together as smooth as butter. She was acting like she was pissed off because things weren't going wrong. She was an asshole to her entire side of the family and it became clear that it was due to the fact that the groom and his family felt we were all beneath them. The mother of the groom actually told the hired wedding staff that the bride's father was paying to leave because my family would be picking up after all of them when they were done with the celebration. I guess my sister felt she needed to impress his family by showing them that she was on their level. Needless to say, my side of the family wasn't too thrilled with her little show and everyone bailed out super early. They had to fake the send-off pictures. Our relationship was pretty rocky for a hot minute after that. We still aren't as close as we used to be. It's getting better, but damn, that whole thing was a nightmare. But you could understand her stress there. Give her a little break, I guess. No, you don't treat your family like shit to show off. I'll never understand putting your family down to look better in someone else's eyes. No. With that out of the way, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon if you want more content to keep appearing in your subscription box. Thanks for watching and until next time.